I think a materialist approach to things is very, very consistent with my experience in Christian social justice.
I feel like the deeper I get into anarchist practice, the deeper my faith is getting at the same time.
I would hope that, securing means of life for all would be something all people of faith would say, oh yes, that's at the basis of what we believe.
Those who are most marginalized know the most about the true, the good, and the beautiful.
To me, it's less that I think building class solidarity is a bad thing, as much as it seems like if you don't attend to things like anti-Black racism, that's always going to get in the way of building class solidarity, actually.
And when you go back, you find that a lot of revolutionary grassroots participatory movements, the precursors to what you could call the barrio assemblies and these grassroots neighborhood organizations, a lot of these were sponsored by the church.
What does it mean to say that the Christian tradition is internally contradictory and there are antagonisms there and you're always being faithful to some aspects and betraying other aspects?
Welcome to the Magnificast, a podcast about Christianity and leftist politics. I'm your co-host, Matt Bernico.
And I'm your other co-host, Dean Detloff.
Dean, it's October. It's the spookiest month of the year. What are you doing to celebrate? How are you getting in the mood? What scary movies are you watching to get yourself pumped up for this great Halloween season?
Oh, man. Famously, I don't like scary movies even a little bit. I hate every one of them. I've never seen one and said it was good. But I did drink a cider today. I felt pretty good about that. The October vibes are here for sure. I'll probably watch a handful of Halloween TV episodes of funny shows. That's usually my October tradition. What about you, Matt? I know you're a big spooky movie connoisseur. What's your top 3 Halloween films?
Oh my God. It's so hard to decide. Instead of telling you my top 3, instead of answering the question that you asked me directly, I'm just going to tell you what I did instead. What I did today instead. Today we watched Nightmare Before Christmas, and that's a pretty Halloween-y movie. And it's a banger. Dang. That movie is great. No notes. I love it. Great claymation. It's spooky. It's fun. My son loves it a lot. And it's a Christmas movie, I know, but it's actually a Halloween movie for us in our house.
It's true. It's a good one. And, I walked by a Hot Topic today as I had to walk through the mall. And they're still making Nightmare Before Christmas merch. So it is a timeless film. I'm sure that you'll be able to buy those cool Jack Skellington wristbands for years to come.
Let me tell you this. Since we're just shooting the breeze, I'll tell you this really quickly on the podcast for whatever reason. So amongst the youths, the kids, there's this emerging genre of media about the back rooms. Are you familiar with the back rooms, Dean?
No.
Oh my God, dude. All right. So I think it's a spinoff of, this is just my amateur read on the meme, but I think it's a spinoff of the liminal spaces subreddit on Reddit. So
sure,
people are always posting pictures of liminal spaces that are mundane but creepy. Just a little too spooky for their own good. Anyways, so that I think out of that sort of milieu of weird content that people like on the internet has emerged this thing called the backrooms, which is this mythical sort of place that you can go to if you kind of you clip out of reality, you exit the simulation, and this is what's behind it, right? It's this spooky capitalist hellscape of an office building you can't escape, or an indoor pool that just kind of goes on forever, it's maze quality.
Great.
And anyways, so now there are all these video games around the idea of the backrooms, and I don't know, my son has absorbed them through cultural osmosis. I don't know exactly how he learned about this. I think sometimes we watch we'll watch TikTok videos together or or something, and he'll see them every now and again. Anyways, he's an avid this story is, now I'm realizing, layers and layers deep. He's an avid Minecraft player because he's 7, and he saw on the Minecraft store that there is a Backrooms Minecraft mod.
Whoa, wild.
Yeah. So of course we downloaded it because it was that's the right amount of spooky for him, because it's it's Minecraft, so it's everything's sort of filtered through the safety of everything being like pixels and blocks
Right,
or whatever.
right.
So anyways, we downloaded it and we played it for like 3 hours today anyways, it puts you like in this like scary office building, and then there's like this monster that slowly chases you through it, and he thought it was the funniest thing ever. He was really into it. So that's been
awesome.
that's been my big spooktacular weekend, is getting into the back rooms, the Minecraft back rooms, and playing this game. And he's just like, man, the sheer terror and delight in his voice when he's like, oh no, the monster's behind us. He was loving it. It was great stuff.
That is great, man. That is probably the level of spooky that I can handle. I think the closest I've gotten is I did just watch Under the Banner of Heaven, which is not a horror series, but had some spooky murder going on in it, and that is basically my threshold. So that's the scale at which all other media, I guess, has to be judged for me in October.
Yeah, I don't blame you. The murder in that show is particularly bad. I don't like it, but it's a great show. Just the same.
Yeah, I mean, especially spooky because, man, are you going to stay a Christian or not? Stay a Mormon or not? Andrew Garfield, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Deconstruction is the spookiest thing, if you think about it. You might be wondering right now, dear listeners, why we're just talking about our everyday lives, why we're just shooting the shit about the most boring things you can imagine. And that's because that's what we're talking about this episode. We're talking about our everyday lives. We're talking about living your life. But instead of dragging it on even longer than we have right now, we're going to spice things up a little bit by talking about a recent book that Dean and I both read called The Imperial Mode of Living: Everyday Life and the Ecological Crisis of Capitalism by Ulrich Brand and Markus Wissen. This book is neat. I like it. Dean, do you like it? Do you not like it? Can you give me a quick thumbs up or thumbs down?
I love parts of it. There are other parts of it I maybe could take or leave, but on the whole,
sure,
I think it's got some great tools.
I think that's every Verso book. There are parts of it I really like, and some parts that just didn't need to be said, and it was fine. The Imperial Mode of Living is a neat book, though, at least the parts that I like. Because it gives some like really helpful conceptual handles to the unseen and like very mundane ways our lives and the lives of most people in the global north are built off of the back of capitalist imperialism. Dean, you're in the mall today, and I'm sure you know probably better than most, right? All of that stuff, it's produced somewhere else. It's produced and shipped through some kind of like big, awful extractivist, mechanism. It can't happen without that for sure. I mean, neither can our whole food system, our cars, all of it. It's all imperialism all the way down, this book tells us. And I think there's something helpful about that. I think just as a person living in the world, right? In the global north, we have to recognize how our lives are extremely dependent on the whole project of imperialism. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot in this episode. I also think that there's something like kind of intuitive about that for Christians, and maybe in a good way and in a bad way. Like Christians already have some kind of vague intuitions about the ways that the powers and principalities of the world can like push us into oppressive and sinful situations without us even knowing. But yeah, I think that the book that I think that this book in particular gives us like some materialist ways of thinking about those big ideas that are helpful. So in this episode, we're going to talk about living our lives. We're going to talk about imperialism, and then we're going to talk about what to do about all of it.
Yep, I agree. I think that's the general maybe utility of the book, especially for Christians on the left, is that it connects with something that a lot of Christians already feel, that the world is out to get you, which can be, I think, a dangerous narrative in certain evangelical circles. But there's also a sense in, I think, all kinds of Christianity that you can't really escape, that there are these kind of structures in the world that are bending your behavior, bending your will, bending your ideas toward, something not so great, something harmful, maybe is a less theologically loaded way of putting it, but something sinful, structures of sin and so on in the world. Right. That's how liberation theology would talk about it, at least the only one I'm comfortable with. And sure. The book is really trying to parse that out in its own way, right? Talking through those kinds of issues. What does it mean to say that the world is built in this imperialist way? And there's a mode of living that comes along with imperialism that we're all sucked into, whether we like it or not. And being able to identify it and talk about it and think through how to resist it is really useful. It's useful, too, because a lot of us probably have some basic sense, if you're on the left, of how you're wrapped up in capitalism as a person living in the global north. But the book does a lot of work to try to parse out like exactly why and how that is, with some real good political storytelling and so on. And I think that's good too. It gives you maybe some better background for understanding what it means to kind of be in those relationships in a global sense.
Yeah, totally. Also, one thing about this book I really do like is that it does devote an entire chapter to telling you about how bad cars are, and I like that a lot.
The book hates cars.
The book hates cars. I hate cars. Beep beep. I want to ride my bike instead. Okay, Dean, start us off. How do we get into this? What's the Imperial Mode of Living, and how is this a helpful concept?
Right. Well, you're in luck, Matt, because one other great thing about this book is it does have extremely well named chapters, including one that is just called "The Concept of the Imperial Mode of Living." Fantastic. Love it when a book just tells you what it wants to tell you. People should do that more often. So I'll say what they say it is in a minute, but just to set it up a little bit, we've talked about imperialism on this show a bunch of times in different contexts. And I think most of the time when I think about imperialism, I think about it in terms of political economy, which is to say, what are the economic structures that operate in the world that actually, get some wealth sucked out of one part of the world and brought to another one, right? What are the kind of economic relationships going on in imperialism? The approach that this book takes, though, is one of what they call hegemonic analysis that they get from Antonio Gramsci, a wild Italian communist. And hegemonic analysis is really fascinating because it's not like it ignores the political economy part. You have to have that. But it also tries to pull in a way of just understanding how you're wrapped up in it, how everyday people are wrapped up in it. What kind of worlds are made possible by those political economies? So that's kind of the approach that they're introducing. So it's a hegemonic analysis of imperialism. All right, with all that out of the way, here is how they define it. The core idea of the concept is that everyday life in the capitalist centers is essentially made possible by shaping social relations and society-nature relations elsewhere. For example, by means of, in principle, unlimited access to labor power and natural resources and sinks, like carbon sinks, on a global scale. The capitalist centers fundamentally depend on the way in which societies elsewhere and their relation to nature are organized so that the transfer of the products of often cheap labor and elements of nature from the global south to the economies of the global north is guaranteed. Conversely, the imperial mode of living in the global north structures societies in other places in a decisively hierarchical way. So lots of big sentences here, but the key is maybe not so hard to understand, which is a good thing. The core idea is that our everyday life, if you live in the global north, is determined by all these kind of social relationships that benefit the global north, right? Taking cheap labor out of the south, structuring whole economies and whole relationships to nature around the world in such a way that the global north benefits from it. And so they're trying to do this hegemonic analysis of that concept. What does that do for us in our daily lives? I think that is actually super helpful.
Yeah, totally. It is super helpful. It made me think. So I was reading this book, and then I was also reading Femi Taiwo's book, Reconsidering Reparations, kind of alongside of it for an article I was writing. And I don't know, because I was reading them both at the same time, I kind of just put them into conversation because that's what you do sometimes with books. But I think there's a lot of resonance between kind of what's going on in both. Taiwo says that it's about capitalist accumulation, like at the end of the day, but it's about this like grand scheme type of capitalist accumulation that sets up these whole systems, like, so that they, so that, the capitalist core is sort of like benefited in this extremely long-term kind of way. And I think that's another helpful, I think, perspective to this too, right? That these are not just like they're not just things that are like set up quickly. These are like historical connections between the North and the South as well. Overall, though, I think the hegemonic analysis here is really helpful because you end up seeing the ways that like your common sense is influenced, I think, directly by these types of imperialist modes of living. Like some things just only make sense to you because of the the whole way that capitalism has set up our entire lives. So I don't know, a lot of things to wrestle with. I think as we consider our perception of the world and like what it is we're doing and like why we're doing the things we're doing. It can also be a kind of existential question to consider.
It's true. And what else is helpful about it is they make a case that you can understand the kind of resurgence of hyper right wing politics, or however you want to characterize that, through this lens as well. Because one thing that they say is the imperial mode of living is being challenged all over the world for lots of reasons. Some intentionally, right? There are like states and countries, people, Bolivia, Brazil, maybe, maybe this week we'll see, Venezuela, other countries who are delinking from that imperial mode of living in a big way, right? Like Bolivia famously refused to work with the IMF. That is a pretty big refusal of that. Right. So the imperial mode of living is in trouble. And that also means down the road, we could be in trouble too. But also, the imperial mode of living creates all kinds of really wild changes on its own. For example, imperialism requires kind of building all these contradictions, right? Like underdeveloping some countries in order to develop these ones. And then it like can't deal with those contradictions, or it sells them to people in weird ways. So, for instance, the stream of refugees or migrants coming into the United States is often the result of imperialism. But the people who benefit from imperialism in the United States, who are right-wing folks at least, don't like that, right? So they're they're reacting really heavily against the fruits of the kind of order that they're also desperately trying to defend. So the book has this kind of thesis that the right is having a resurgence around the whole world, not just in the U.S., in part because the imperial mode of living is really strained right now under a lot of those contradictions. And there are a lot of folks who want to rush to its defense and not let it go under. And the book also kind of makes, I think, a strong claim that it's going to go under whether they want it to or not. But like the way in which that might happen is not predetermined, and all that to say it's kind of causing all these morbid symptoms, as Gramsci would put it, and now that we're all kind of in the Gramscian mode here. So I think that's interesting. It's probably not the whole story, but it's probably true of the right wing in Europe and the United States and Canada, right? There's a fear that these countries in the West are losing their power. They're losing their role in the global order as China and India and other economies are growing. And so they're digging their heels in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. You can pretty easily see the way that like climate fascism or something would play into that type of framework. Yeah. I mean, even a few weeks ago when we were talking about Pakistan and climate reparations, we did briefly talk a little bit about the ways that conservatives in the United States who are concerned about climate change use China as like a scapegoat, right? To sort of build this, right. I mean, exactly what we're talking about here, sort of a climate fascist or a right-wing like climate reactionary wing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that's right. The imperial mode of living will probably not go on as they would like it to, but it is important how we ease our way out of it so we don't spiral towards something worse. Okay, so the book is called The Imperial Mode of Living, and there's like this big on the left, especially in like the post-Marxist French left. There's like this big history of books that are titled things similar. The one whenever I think about the title of this book, I always think about the title of this other book called The Revolution of Everyday Life by Rule of Anayim, who is a French anarchist who was like really associated with the Situationists in the late 60s and 70s. And in his book, he, the whole idea is that we should, because capitalism kind of like interpolates us and makes us its subjects in one way or the other, we need to find different ways of living our lives so that we can oppose it, right? And this book is not altogether different, and it's not suggesting something. In the end, there's a resonance there, I think. But there's also, I think this book is doing something kind of beyond that, or is trying to kind of like get around the lifestylist critique of a lot of these things. It's important, I think, to note that up front, right? like this book is not about to tell you that like you're the problem, and if you change your life in particular, you could change everything else. Like it's not saying that. It's not saying that like you should become a vegetarian because like that will save the world. But what it is saying is like you as a person are implicated in a particular like mode of life that is made possible by imperialist relationships between different countries. And that's an important distinction, right? That it's not necessarily that you need to change your life or die or something or whatever, right? It's about it's about the ways that your life in particular is implicated in all these other big structural problems that you by yourself couldn't actually address even if you wanted to.
Yeah, and the key there is whether you like it or not, that is the structure for your life, right? So if you're a right-wing person, maybe you kind of are intentionally defending it or whatever. But just by virtue of existing in a global north economy, you're kind of wrapped up in these particular flows of capital, of value, of labor, and so on, commodities, and all the rest of it. That like you can change your life all you want, and you should. I think you should change your life in ways that
totally.
are gentler and kinder, and so on. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be propped up by those imperialist relations.
I think that's right. Like for example. In the past year or so, I've started riding my bike, I think the majority of the time. Whenever I can ride my bike, I will do it. Because I think that is a kinder and gentler way to live on this big spaceship we call Earth. But at the same time, I have to recognize that, like, my bike, it's electric, by the way. I think that's awesome. I love riding my electric bike around and honking my horn at people. I think that's really fun. But I do have to recognize the ways that even my electric bike, as cool as it is, and like as countercultural as it is still like only possible because of extractivist industries in in Latin America or in Africa or whatever, right? Like it is cool that I changed my life, but it's definitely not enough to do anything. I think in the grand scheme of like the imperialist economy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bike is a great example, right? Or like not eating meat, all these other kinds of things that we might do to pattern our lives in a way that makes sense, but or maybe is trying to get us out of those imperialist relations as much as we possibly can. But yeah, nevertheless, we're stuck with it. One way that they talk about it is the sort of dual nature of hegemony and subjectivation, as they call it. So they say hegemonic ideas are widely accepted, secured in socioeconomic, political, and institutional terms, and deeply embedded in people's everyday practices. So I think that is a big piece of it, right? It's kind of around us in all the things that make our lives possible. And they also go on to say a theory of hegemony that attributes great importance to common sense and everyday practices provides an understanding of domination. It simultaneously widens the view of the subjects who subordinate themselves to domination and to the way in which they, or I guess we could say we, do this. That is, the processes of subjectivation through which domination produces and stabilizes itself, but through which it might also be challenged. So lots of big academic jargon there. But what they're really saying is because we live in these hegemonies, these big, sprawling things that suck us into it, it turns us into certain kinds of people. It makes us certain kinds of subjects. But at the same time, we could try to maybe recognize those processes of subjectivation and also do our best to see that as a point of resistance and kind of changing our subjectivity, changing the kinds of people that we are. And I think that's also maybe a good way to bring the Christianity piece into the conversation, right? Like Christianity, for better and for worse, is kind of that. Like it's a big hothouse for growing particular kinds of people, good ones and not so good ones. Good kinds of practices and bad kinds of practices. In the mid 2000s, when we were both in school, there was kind of a trend in some, I think, pretty conservative Christian circles to talk about Christianity this way, that like it has this kind of formative quality. And we've talked about it a lot in the show in the past. But the idea is that the church is a kind of discipline as opposed to the discipline of the world. And I think that conservative way of putting it is not so good. But it does kind of hit on something that is true, that Christianity does create these different processes of making you a certain kind of subject. And, some Christianities are kind of hand in hand with the imperial mode of living. Like they exist in order to participate in that imperialist hegemony and kind of make you a good Christian imperialist as well. But I think there's other ways of thinking about how Christianity can kind of interrupt that process of making you an imperialist subject. Like it puts you in touch with the poor, it puts you in touch with the global south, with other people in other parts of the world. It might maybe widens your conscience or something like that. And I think that's a helpful thing it's something I think about at least when I'm going to mass and participating in, Christian solidarity kind of activities and so on. It's like, this is a version of my faith that's actually trying to short circuit the subjectivation processes of the imperial mode of living and maybe create some new ones, like to make me a different kind of person. Like that's what I'm sort of going to my faith tradition for, in a way, is that counter formation. And I think it's helpful for us to reflect on that intentionally and maybe think through how we can bolster those ways of delinking ourselves from imperialism.
Yeah, I agree. This book in the end will have a lot of things to say about like rethinking the ways that we think of ourselves as subjects, and that's cool. I have a really hard time. I mean, maybe because I am a Christian, but I have a hard time thinking of those types of like practices without thinking of them as like spiritual types of practices. I mean, maybe not even explicitly religious in every sense, but thinking about yourself in a way that kind of like escapes the orbit of the hegemony of capitalism, I think is kind of like inherently a spiritual practice, or at least like a communist one or something, because it takes some work of like resituating yourself within the grand scheme of humans or like of creation or something. It's hard to think about like, like why would you care or whatever that you live an imperialist mode of being or something without resituating yourself in the world, or without like thinking through like why you share some kind of common destiny with like the people in the global south or whatever. I don't know. To me, that seems like a pretty spiritual practice, and I think one where Christianity at its best definitely has something to kind of like give us in that area. So we'll keep talking about that, I think, at the end of the episode for sure. But a great tip of the hat to it right now. I think maybe a great way to kind of draw some of this out, or like to explain the hegemony piece, is to maybe give some examples that might be helpful. And like we said at the top of the episode, this book hates cars, and that's cool. I like that. So they have a chapter. They have a chapter really aptly titled called "Imperial Automobility." And I think it draws out a lot of interesting questions, and it gives very few interesting answers, but that's okay. It starts off giving us some extremely jarring information about SUVs. Let me tell you about SUVs. Okay. In 2017, almost 34% of the passenger car market consisted of SUV units sold. Globally, 27.85 million new SUVs were sold in 2017, which is a 12.7% increase compared to 2016. In North America, the share of SUVs in the passenger car market rose from 36.4% in 2016 to 39.3% in 2017. In China, it rose from 37% in 2016 to 41.6% in 2017. Okay, so this is an important factor, or at least that's what the chapter wants us to believe, and I do believe it. So SUVs are on the rise, and that's a problem. SUVs are on the rise, and that's a problem because SUVs are more environmentally intensive to make. I mean, it requires more extraction. It requires more exploitative labor power. It requires more fossil fuels, honestly. I mean, like, you can't have an SUV unless it's completely electric without a whole lot of fossil fuels. And even if it is electric, then maybe the plant that's charging it up runs on coal or whatever. I don't know, man. But like, all I'm trying to say here is that SUVs are not a carbon neutral kind of thing in the world. The chapter goes on to argue, though, that the all-terrain vehicle and SUV boom is a great demonstration of the imperial mode of living and its trend toward deepening and universalization. SUVs are extremely resource and emission intensive, and the chapter will kind of go on to say that like the SUV, the obsession with SUVs is like a great example of the like the imperialist sort of subjectivization of the global north, right? It's like it's characteristic for a handful of reasons, and I'll tell you why. But before we get there, Dean, I don't know what do you hate about cars, just as a person. Before we get to why they hate them, what's your big problem?
Yeah, man. I mean, what's there to like, honestly, at the end of the day? They're big, they're loud, they're fast. They will kill me if I don't see them. And that's one thing I really don't like about them. I don't like their ability to kill me if I don't see them.
100%. I hate that. I hate how they do almost kill me a lot.
Huge bummer. They they ruin our cities because cities are designed around cars. They they ruin our ecosystems. They make deer confused. Just all in all, an awful blight on the planet. In media theory, there is all kinds of literature about cars. Everybody hates them for all kinds of very weird reasons. But one really fun discussion of cars in, I want to say it's either Peter Sloterdijk or Paul Virilio. I can't remember which one, but probably both of them say it. They're talking about like the subjectivity of a car. Like, what does it do to you? What kind of, like, when you're driving the car, who are you? And the sort of conclusion that comes through is that the car is like, it sort of, it barricades you against the rest of the world, right? It's the ultimate private sphere in which you're completely disconnected from the public. You have no relationship to those outside of you. And I think that is just true of my own experience driving a car, right? Like, I'm an angrier person when I drive a car. I'm tuned out. I'm not really sort of invested in the world around me, as opposed to like if I'm on the subway or a bus or whatever, in a public space that is moving around in public transit. Even though I'm getting faster from one place to another, and even though there are, all kinds of challenges with all forms of transportation, I guess, it's a more social way of being. So I think cars, they're bad. They'll kill you, and they're fundamentally antisocial things.
Yeah, man. You know what I hate about cars is that they'll kill you. And also, what I hate about cars the most is that people drive them. I think that's the worst part.
Oh, agreed.
Man, whenever I ride my bike, and I'll like somebody will nearly kill me because they just like go through a stop sign because they were looking at their phone when they were driving.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me so mad, like irrationally so. I don't like it.
I mean,
think it's
bad. Pretty rational.
I think it is pretty rational. I mean, but I'm like, I get really angry. And yeah, it's cool. My son rides in the back and we both yell at cars and then we honk the horn at them and they don't even know we're there. So what do they care? Man, also, you know what I hate? Sorry, just kind of like going off on a tangent here, but I see people just like dropping like trash out their window constantly. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that? It is because you think of yourself as an individual that nobody could possibly see you. You're hidden away in your car. You're inscripted into the private army of car drivers, and no one could possibly bring any reproach upon you. So you just drop your Big Mac wrapper out your window. Man, I hate it.
You know what? One kind of thing that we've used in the past on the show to figure out what would Jesus do is, could you imagine him doing it? And I can't imagine Jesus driving a car.
No, never. No, he could ride on a donkey. Yes. He could ride a bike. I could Christ on a bike, People say it. It's an expression.
Exactly. Yep, I can see him on a subway. I can see him on the bus. Cannot see him behind the wheel of an SUV.
No way. No way.
Listen, if you're listening to this podcast in an SUV right now, sorry. But God does want us to, we are not going to have SUVs in the kingdom of God. That's what it comes down to for me. And you know what? We should make that a bumper sticker.
It's great. Slap it on the back of your SUV and watch people be confused. Okay, so Ulrich Brand and Markus Wissen, they say that the SUV driver could be understood as the automotive subjectivity of neoliberal capitalism. A great claim. I love it. The polarization between insecurity and security, as well as between superiority and subalternity. Some needless jargon. A contrast heightened by driving SUVs on the streets corresponds to a growing social polarization as well to the neoliberal diffusion of market and competition-based mechanisms in all social sectors. Instead of simply corresponding the car and the subjectivity of its driver to embody each other, thanks to its material qualities, the SUV intensifies the very social relation shaped by competition and recklessness, of which it is a product. It does so by producing the corresponding form of subjectivity. So the argument here, I think, is really interesting, right? SUVs are a materialization of a particular type of subject of neoliberal capitalism. Someone who is individual, who is always competing with their neighbors, right? You got to have even a bigger SUV than them. You got to even have a faster one. You have to have an SUV that drives itself or whatever. And also, I do like the phrase "is shared by its competition and recklessness of which it is a product," which is great because they are reckless. It's interesting because there's this they draw this out kind of throughout the chapter that an SUV is a popular automobile because it seems so much safer than other cars because it's bigger and higher off the ground, right? If somebody else hits you, the chances that if you had a big SUV, you'd be fine. The other car would be wrecked, but you would be just okay. Or in case of like a climate disaster or other kind of natural disaster, because your SUV is it's got all-wheel drive and it sits up a little bit higher, you can drive through a big puddle and it would just be okay, right? It's like there's a sense of like safety in your individualization in there. But something else they point out that's really interesting is that SUVs are safe as long as SUVs are safe, but not if everyone else is also driving an SUV.
Right.
Which is pretty funny. So, it's about they embody a sense of like protection, but also like extreme haphazard toward other people, which I think is it is a great explanation of neoliberal capitalism, right? You're trying to do something good for yourself. You're trying to be a person who like can't be culpable for whatever ill will befall you, but like at the end of the day, you're putting everyone at risk because you're trying so hard.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's helpful that they have a whole chapter basically on the car and what the car symbolizes in the Imperial Mode of Living. We could definitely do the same thing with all kinds of other stuff, right? Like,
Totally.
I don't have a car, but I do have a smartphone. I wear clothes, right? All kinds of things. All the commodities that you can buy, all the things I walked by at the mall today. The big hot topic, Nightmare Before Christmas merch. It's all made by folks in other countries for the most part. And the whole point is that the global north is trying to get as much wealth created somewhere else and then funneled into the global north as possible. And I think it's important to kind of see that as the real piece of this as well, right? Just by virtue of like, if I go to the mall and I buy a new pair of jeans or something, like at point of sale, if you're a person who's completely normal, doesn't think about any of this kind of stuff, political economy and so on, at that moment, like you're just buying a new pair of jeans, right? And you're being a regular person. Probably everybody I walked by at the mall had no real kind of thought about it. About what they're buying for the most part. But the fact is, like, as Marx says, there are whole stories behind commodities, or there's kind of what he calls a hidden abode of production, right? That somewhere else there's all these narratives that have to unfold to get that pair of jeans on the shelf, right? People have to pick the cotton, they have to sew the jeans, they got to ship the jeans, somebody's got to put the jeans on the shelf, all that kind of stuff. And when you live in the global north, because most of our commodities are filtered to us from the global south, our everyday way of life, our everyday way of being is just, whether we like it or not, whether we think about it or not, it is reliant on work being done somewhere else, right? And it's reliant on the global north even shaping the way that other economies or whole kind of societies work. We shape the everyday lives of other people so that we can live our lives in these particular ways. And I think that's really a useful bit of the book, right? Whether it's cars or some other commodity, we're kind of like ingratiated into this way of being in a hegemonic way. And isn't that spooky for this October?
That is the spookiest thing I can imagine. A minute ago, you mentioned the other people walking around the mall. They're normal because they aren't thinking about all these things. And I think that's actually,
right.
I mean, while maybe condescending, it is also an interesting and probably helpful way to think about it. In the opening of this book, the authors say that normality is produced precisely by masking the destruction in which it's rooted. And I think that's actually the whole point, right? That's that's cultural hegemony in a nutshell, right? Nobody thinks of the ways that their pants are made or like the way that society is built around cars or whatever, because like that's the whole point of hegemony, right? The question is like stupid if you ask it out loud. People will be like, why would you bother? I don't know. Sorry, they're cars. Why are cities built in this like this really bonkers way so people can barely walk across the street? Because we all have cars. We all have 2-ton like metal death traps that we have to like shuffle around the streets. Like that's why. Duh, idiot. But like that's the problem, right? That we can't even see those things as actual questions, or if you bring them up, you're like a weird crank. And it's true. I'm a weird crank, but I'm also bringing them up, and I think it's important. To maybe draw this point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just one piece about that is like also you shouldn't have to think about those things at the end of the day, right? Like,
wouldn't it be cool if you didn't? If you had a government that was just like gonna do it, just kind of figure it out for you.
Exactly. Like, it sucks that you have to think twice about buying a pair of jeans. I hate that. I'm thinking about this because I do need to buy a new pair of jeans, and I'm like agonizing over it. I was walking through the mall today, being like, "Dang, I hate how many jeans are in this mall." I don't know if anyone else feels this way. I find like a lot of extremely weird thoughts come to me when I walk through a mall. I think we mentioned this on a past episode or maybe the walk-in, but like whenever like a Pixar movie comes out, I'm always like, oh man, how many like lunchboxes are they going to make from this movie alone? What a weird thing. Today when I was walking through the mall, I was trying to think of like how many pairs of jeans are like in the mall today. Like, what an extremely weird thing to think about. But, the fact of the matter is we live in an economy that doesn't actually have to have like an efficient answer to that question, and doesn't have to ask where they come from or what happens to them when they don't get bought and they, get moved to clearance and nobody buys them on clearance. Like, where do they go? Like, all those kinds of things. Like, you just don't they don't occur to you, or they shouldn't have to occur to you. And man, I just want to live in a world where I can buy a pair of jeans and not think twice about it.
Man, I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but remember that story? I think it was in The Guardian a few months ago, but it was about there's like a desert in Chile where all of the like the clothes go that don't get like, they don't get through customs into other countries, and how there's just like piles of clothes sitting in the desert. Man, whenever I'm out somewhere and I do like I'm shopping for clothes, I think about how many of the same pairs of pants are sitting out in that Chilean desert,
for free.
For free, exactly. I could go there. Give me a plane ticket. Get some great deals on jeans. To drive this point home, though, about cars, not jeans. Man, wouldn't that be wild? This chapter was about jeans, though. To drive this point home about cars, the authors say that the automotive subjectivity considers it natural that children can't play in the streets where moving cars endanger their lives and parked ones take up their space for play. That cyclists are pushed aside into impassable strips of lanes on footpaths and pavements where they come into conflict with pedestrians and are forced to zigzag between advertising pillars, trees, and parking meters. And that pedestrians line up in droves at traffic lights to let a wave of cars go by, enduring their noise and exhaust fumes without complaint. I love this because it is like maximum cranky, but it's also like actually a really good point. Like, why do we do this? Like, by my house, there is a big, busy street that is awful to walk across. It is 4 lanes of traffic of people going like 45 miles per hour. And it is like objectively stupid because people live here. Man, what are you doing? Why? Like, all these people live in the houses everywhere around this, in every direction. There are no businesses. There's just like only people living here, and like people can't even cross the street. I mean, there's a coffee shop that's down the street, and it's like it gets like so much little traffic because like people can't actually even park in front of it, right? There's no place to park because there's so many cars. It's just like, what are we doing? Like, this is not a society designed for people. It's one designed for cars, and it's bad.
It's true. I think, I don't know, cars are complicated. The politics of them are complicated. It's very easy to say all this if you live in a city, for example. With public transit, it's a lot harder if you're in a rural or remote area. But even there, cars are so weird. Like, so I'm from a really small town in Michigan, and now I live in a big city in Canada. And when I moved to the big city, I found myself walking all the time. Like, if something is a 30-minute walk away, I just assume I'm going to walk there, for the most part. And apart from that, I'll take transit. So when I go back home for Christmas or holidays or whatever, it's so wild because my family will be like, "Oh man, I'm sorry we don't have a car for you, or you don't have a car or whatever. Why don't you just hang out at home, and then like we'll swing by for work, we'll pick you up, we'll like drive you wherever you want to go." And I'm always like, I don't know, like you can walk across probably my entire town in like 30 minutes. So it's like, if I want to go to the coffee shop, I'll just walk there. It's like not a big deal. But you know, it just doesn't occur to anybody because everyone just has a car. And it just changes the way that you move through the world, right? To kind of become reliant on it in these bizarre sorts of ways. So I don't know. All that to say, we should do something different. We don't need this.
We should. The chapter does end with some, I mean, not really strongly worded recommendations, but it is just like we should actually start having questions about like what does it mean to be mobile in a space, and I think that is probably a pretty good direction to head. You know, like I've been saying a lot of mean things about cars, and I don't like them. But, at the same time, there are people for who cars are it. That's the way they're going to get around. And like, fair enough. Like, whatever. but also, there are people who definitely could figure out something different if public transit was prioritized, or like you could ride a bike through a city without being murdered by a car or something. So I don't know. I think there are a lot of conversations to have there, and people should have them. Listen to your local bike activists. I'm sure they have a lot to say about it.
Yeah. All right. So cars are bad unless you need them. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I'm going to tell you most of us don't need them. The Imperial Mode of Living, it's a good concept. You might be asking yourself, what is the alternative? What am I supposed to do? And guess what? This book will not tell you the answer to that.
It's a bummer. In ways, it's a big bummer.
It's a huge bummer. It is a classic Verso book problem also. There's some grab bag politics at the end here. But they do have a good concept that is maybe a good counter concept, which is instead of an imperial mode of living, we should have a solidary mode. Solidary is how they put it, mode of living. I like solidarity mode of living better because I just say it, I guess, automatically.
Yeah. There's no reason to coin a new term here, I don't think.
It's probably more grammatically correct to say solidary, but I don't know. I've never said it anywhere else in my life. Anyway, it's a good concept. I'm selling it really well, obviously. What they say is the struggles for a solidary mode of living focus on the fact that the conditions considered problematic should be abolished and alternatives should be strengthened. Guess what? You could probably guess that. Right? We should get rid of the bad stuff, do the good stuff.
I don't know. I think that's a great idea. I would love to abolish the bad things and do the good things.
But the key here is they want to talk about the term they use as a counter hegemony, right? If the imperial mode of living is hegemonic, it permeates our institutions, it permeates our economies, our everyday life, our habits, and so on. What we need is a counter hegemony, something that can replace all of that. And I think I still like this because even though it's maybe short on prescriptions, it does frame things in the right way insofar as it's not about dropping out of society or kind of having a lifestyle change that will change everything else just by virtue of being so saintly or holy or pure or whatever. But it really emphasizes that, like, this is a hegemony problem. It is a systemic problem, and it's only going to get changed by virtue of changing that hegemony, that system. By changing our very way of life, which means to say the conditions that make our lives the way that they are. And I think that is helpful. So instead of an imperial mode of living, we need a solidarity mode of living. I'm here for that.
Yeah, I think it's good insofar as what you said, right? It's suggesting that we think about these things a little bit differently. You know, I guess my problem is that, you know, if it's a hegemony problem, then it becomes like, this isn't necessarily what the authors are saying, but I think that some people might construe it this way. If you have a hegemony problem, right, and you need to form a cultural, like an alternative hegemony, you need to somehow throw the cultural hegemony into question. That seems like a very intellectual task. You know, you just need to get a podcast and start talking to people until they change their mind, or like whatever. You know, you need means TV, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Or you need to get a subscription to the monthly review, buy your parents one, and they'll change their minds. And that's not true. Cultural hegemonies, I think, can only be questioned with like actual organizing, right? And like really doing something. So I guess I want to just make that clear that is what they're saying. Not just that you should think differently, and that we should wish the bad things away, and we should, wish the good things better, but that like they're talking about like actually questioning like the real hegemony through organizing and like and intellectual things too. Some of the things they mention are like, they give a quick pitch for degrowth, which is great. They talk about the ways that like people like Bernie Sanders and AOC have like drawn out more feelings of dissatisfaction from people, which I think is a pretty positive way to put their impact on politics. I like that actually a lot. Bernie Sanders, not a perfect guy for sure. Not even always a socialist in the way that you want him to be. But if nothing else, he has definitely made a whole lot of people. He's given a whole lot of people some language to express their dissatisfaction. I think that's probably pretty good. Some of the things they talk about are pipeline protests, and we're here for that. That's great. And then also people who are working on like resettling climate refugees and doing that kind of work. I think that's all like cool stuff. So they're not just talking about like thinking something different or whatever. It's not an intellectual exercise. This is like this is politics stuff.
Yeah, one way they put it is they say changes to the imperial mode of living must begin at different points. It's about creating different political rules, social expectations, and general approaches that push back against capitalist expansion and appropriation and make a solidary mode of living possible. And they also say it's important to change kind of our subjectivity. But I like that idea that we have to sort of push back at different points. I used to teach this class on Christianity and prison abolition, and the beginning of the class was really trying to drive home the weight of mass incarceration and like why is it the way that it is. And there's so many gifted people like Angela Davis and Michelle Alexander and others really talking about like prisons are not just places people go, they're like ingrained in our culture, right? There's TV shows like Cops, there's Law and Order, all this kind of stuff that makes cops into heroes and criminals into bad guys. And it's like our whole world's organized in such a way that we think prisons are natural and necessary. And I remember like I had a few students always when I would teach that class who would be like, I'm so overwhelmed by how bad prisons are and how impossible they seem to uproot. And that is probably the right reaction to have. It's a huge problem. But the thing that I would always say, and that I do actually believe, is the sort of the good news flip side of recognizing that problem is that you can also intervene in the problem of prisons at literally any point, and you'll be doing something. Like you can write a new TV show that doesn't tell that story about cops and robbers or whatever. You can write letters to people in prison. You can talk to your neighbors about prisons. You can make a piece of art that tells a different story about, wrongs and rights and forgiveness and reconciliation and justice and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I feel the same way about the imperial mode of living. Like, it is everywhere, and that means that you can intervene at basically any point. Like, it is creating different kinds of subjects. It's trying to turn you into a certain kind of person. And every time you refuse that and do something different yourself and also do something different with others, especially, that's kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit further. It's not creating revolution. There needs to be a lot more done. But I always kind of see that as like, I guess, something kind of empowering in the short term. You've got to do something. So it's kind of like, well, do anything and see how far that gets you.
Yeah, well, that's instructive, I think. Do anything. It couldn't hurt, you might say. A great basis for political action. It couldn't hurt.
Sometimes it does hurt, but you'll figure that out too, and that's important.
Well, then you'll just stop. It'll be fine. To push that point a bit further, the authors say that counter-hegemony against the imperial mode of living thus implies disputes about other rules, political and economic strategies, investments, and control over means of production, and also means refusing to live certain forms of everyday life or even abstaining from them entirely. The motivation for these changes can include unfulfilled desires and blocked opportunities to leading a fulfilling life. So there's this kind of thing here that I think is interesting because it does like it gets up to the line of doing like lifestyle politics. Like, you could just be a vegan or something, which I'm not, but I'm a vegetarian. I think that's good enough. But I think the thing here that's interesting is that like creating a counter hegemony against a big idea like neoliberal capitalism in general. It doesn't have to be neoliberal. you can pick up all of these different places to sort of raise disputes. And to me, like, okay, like riding a bike in and of itself, right? That's not raising a dispute. That's just like riding your bike. And that's cool. Riding your bike is great. And there's something to celebrate about that. Nothing wrong with riding your bike. And there's lots of like great reasons to do it, even if it's not a political thing to do. But like, riding if you can ride your bike in a way that does dispute the rules of your city of capitalism, or that raises questions about the way that your city is designed in general, that could be cool, right? Like, I think every major city or even every small city has like sort of bicycle lobbies or people who are cyclists and are activists that are interested in like better bike lanes or getting people to stop parking in bike lanes or whatever. I think those types of activity are really actually pretty important, right? You can find these different places where people might get into a struggle that really would throw the whole thing into question, where it really kind of carried through. And I think what it means to be a good leftist in those spaces is like agitating people to ask those questions, like why is it that we have 4 lanes of a big street like in the middle of a place where everyone lives? Why can kids barely cross the street to go to school? Like, that's a great question. And I think if people were to answer those questions very honestly, and you push them to do so, you'd get some pretty interesting answers. Like, well, I don't know, because our city is built around cars and maybe it shouldn't, is somewhere you might get. So I think that's kind of a helpful idea when it comes to cultural hegemony, right? Is that like we shouldn't think of these things as like lifestyle politics, or that's a dead end, right? Thinking of them as lifestyle politics is a dead end. But finding the ways that they actually like prod the bigger question is really important. You find these new sort of like avenues of question raising and struggle. I think that is some pretty helpful work, actually.
Yeah, I think too, this is maybe a good place to think about churches as really unique places for all kinds of reasons. Like, churches play major roles in establishing hegemonies. Usually they uphold them. That is what they tend to do, whether you're a feudal lord or a capitalist boss or whatever. You can typically rely on the churches to hold you up. But churches also have all these really fun and subtle ways of structuring our everyday life. Like, they are the places where we meet other people in community. We learn things about ourselves and others. And also we just do weird stuff, right? Like, one thing I always think about, one of the weirdest things that an evangelical church I went to in high school did is they would do this big fundraiser where they would they would have a big like meat banquet, and it would just be weird meats. And that was the whole thing. So it would be like, you can go get regular meat for sure. You can get yourself a cow burger or whatever. But you can also get all the weirdest meats that they could possibly get to northern Michigan by the time of this thing. So you could eat alligators and turtles and kangaroos and whatever else is going on in there. It was this whole thing because it's the middle of nowhere in Michigan. People don't ever see that stuff. And so what a great fundraiser and so on. Like, meat is, I'm not like a militant vegetarian. I think it's complicated. Some people probably should eat meat. I don't know. Indigenous people should have a right to eat meat. That's all fine. But at the end of the day, like, the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it was revealed that like the Brazilian governmental representatives, they like edited the policy piece of that report to remove the suggestion that people should eat less meat. Which was a suggestion made by scientists who were like, if you don't want the world to go up in flames, we should eat less meat. Brazil removed it because meat is a major export out of Brazil for global North consumption. And like, especially
at McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. And what a completely bizarre thing that like this North American appetite for meat is driving the production and economy in Brazil, and Brazil's need to rely on that export is also changing UN reports on climate change, right? Like, what a weird kind of feedback loop of bizarre behavior. So all that to say, to bring it back to this weird fundraiser, it's like, I don't know, what if you like went to your church and you were like, let's do a fundraiser, and the challenge is you should make like the most delicious vegetarian meal just for fun. Like, you can get so many church ladies to do that, and it would be awesome, and you'd get a bunch of great like veggie chilies out of it. It would be so fun. And it would be producing a counter hegemony, right? It would be poking holes in that kind of obsession. You should do the exact opposite of what this evangelical church did. Figure out how to have this great vegetarian cooking contest. It's just, churches are such unique spaces for like people to do something different, to expose each other to different things, to challenge each other, to do different things in mundane ways. And I think they're untapped resources when it comes to countering the imperial mode of living. We should tap into them creatively.
Oh, you guys want the weird meat? Well, let me tell you about black bean burgers.
The weirdest meat of all.
That's right. Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, I think there's a lot of different sectors of life that can fall into this kind of category, that is political, but maybe you don't think about it as such or something. I don't know. I'm thinking of, I mean, as a vegetarian in particular, also not a very militant one either. I was thinking about whenever you do raise those types of questions with people about the ethicalness of what they're eating. People don't like to talk about that, and I understand why. I mean, it is complicated, like you said, Dean. But people will often cite, well, what about the farm workers that are that are embroiled in like the unethical production of vegetables or something in this country? And I think that's a great question. Like, hell yeah,
Yeah,
bring that
exactly.
up. Just the other day, farm workers in California, the California governor signed a bill into law, and now California farm workers can unionize via card check, and that's awesome because farm workers in the United States are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act. So it's like, I mean, even that I think is kind of an interesting place to like prod people about the production of their food. I don't know. It's annoying. People don't like it, but like, I think it's a great question. Like, why are people who get that don't have to be paid a minimum wage? Like, why are they the people that are picking our food? A great question. It's an unsustainable thing. Don't do it. Let them have a union. Let them get paid more. Like, I don't know. Great questions to ask.
Yeah, and I guess maybe seeing Christianity's contribution so much on this podcast, I think we're always looking for ways of being like, what's the radical Christian interpretation of this or that thing that will kind of draw Christians into the struggle or whatever. And I think we should do that. But it's important to really think through materially, what did churches do? What are churches for? What are Christians doing? And so on. And something I really love about my job at Development of Peace is we talk a lot about what people do at the parish level. And because it's a Christian solidarity organization, every year we do these campaigns and people kind of bring this educational content and other things into their parishes. And like, it's a wild thing because if you're a DMP member and you go to your church, like at some point during the year, someone, me or somebody else, is going to like talk to you about, I don't know, like what our partners are doing in the global south, right? Like resisting, let's say, a big Canadian mine in Peru or something. And like, you're going to take that information and take it to your church. And at the end of mass, like you'll get up there and give a spiel about that. And like a bunch of people who are completely normal, right? A bunch of people who are ingrained in the imperial mode of living are, at least for like 5 to 10 minutes, going to have to think about the fact that Canada has the most mines headquartered in this country out of any other country in the world. And like, where else would they ever hear that? And what other context would that be put in this sort of like milieu of, because we're Christians, we should care about this, right? Like, churches are such unique spaces, and they're really fertile ground, I think, for building that counter hegemony and for really connecting with, what do the moral commitments of our faith call us to in a material way, and how can we use those communities and spaces to poke holes in the hegemony of imperialism? I think we need to be more creative about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the Catholics have you, and that's great. I appreciate that you're doing that. I think also like mainline Protestant Christianity, I think is such a fertile ground for this kind of thing because, first of all, nobody goes to church. Church attendance among like mainline Protestant Christianity is always trending downward because who wants to go to church when you can go to brunch, especially when Christianity is like, stupid and bad and it's made your life awful. But like all that to say, like mainline Protestant churches, like if you go to one, and especially like more like liberal denominations and more progressive congregations specifically, if you go to one and you show like an interest in being there, like dang, you can rise to the top so quickly, and you can like make people ask these questions. And I don't know, maybe you should. The Young Lords did it. They occupied a church. Maybe you could go and just get on the vestry. You know, that's what I'm trying to say here. Make people really like ask these big questions though, because no one's doing it. So you could do it. That could be your thing or not. But I'm just saying, you could go to church and it could be a radical thing if you wanted it to be.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have it. That's the assignment. The Imperial Mode of Living, it's bad, but you can contribute to stopping it by going to your church, having the big vegetarian chili cook-off for fall, and I can't wait to see the pictures.
That's right. I mean, the vegetarian cook-off, you can go feed people, let homeless people sleep on your steps. Who cares, man? You could do something, though, and start making all the church people think about it a little bit more, and it'd be great.
Thanks for listening to the Magnificast. If you like what you heard, I can't wait to hear about your big chili and what you're going to do at your church to give all these old folks making these great veggie casseroles and so on. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/themagnificast. You can support us there at $2 or more and get a great invite to our Discord where we talk about all this stuff and more, and probably share great vegetarian chili recipes, I guess, this fall. You can
know we're going to, for sure.
Yeah,
I got a good one.
Especially after this episode, I think it's going to have to be a thing. Let's see. What else do I have to say? Oh, our music is by Amari Armstrong, and our outro is by The Illogical Spoon, and we'll see you next week.
I don't wanna get up for church in the morning, souls alive. Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation. Never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between us and our Lord. Jackson, you keep your hoods up. Keep your hoods up and you stay up late. In Jackson, you keep your hoods up. Well, you keep your hoods up and you stay up late. Oh, don't mind a cold night, but we might mind if you leave too soon. So come on now, it's still early. Beside what else I